Bill is a local boy done made good, kind of so to speak. I think he graduated from Sturgis High School in 1971 and went on to be a history teacher in Lemon and in New Underwood, and has since been just kind of an all-about history expert in teaching at the community education in Rapid City. So he's going to do a program for us today about Custer in the Hills. So I welcome Bill Swanson.
All right, there is two gentlemen sitting on a bench outside a bar, a saloon in Deadwood, and they watch this wagon pull up, and they pull off 20 barrels of whiskey and one 100-pound barrel of flour. And one of the guys turns to the other and says, "What about that? What the hell they want with all that flour?" I've done community education for, this will be my 27th year. This is the longest, Ghost Towns of the Black Hills is one of the longest, well, is the longest running class in community education. It started in 1975. One gentleman did a couple of classes. My father took it over. He did it for 22 years. When he passed, my brother, and blame him back there, he was one of them, pointed and said, "Let Bill do it. He likes history." And no, your father didn't teach me how to do history. Because of him, I went into chemistry and physics. Anyway, when I graduated here, that was a long time ago before they invented paper. So if you look at the cliffs around north of Sturgis, that's where we had to do our homework. And when you made a mistake, you had to erase by chipping off the rock. So we were the ones that invented dirt. Anyway, I graduated. I went to the United States Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point. I graduated from there. Naval Reserve. I worked my way up to captain on an oil tanker. I came back after 20 years, built some houses. Can't work with my brothers too much. And so I heard an advertisement one time, be a teacher. That's what I wanted to be. I did want to be history, and so I wound up in chemistry and physics. Don't ask me. And so anyway, but I've been doing this for 27 years, so I've got some information over at my table over there if you're interested. I would like to start a class here. I have 4 sessions of classes. Each class is from 6 to 8 classes. They last 3 hours each class. I used to give out handouts. Now community education doesn't want to print them because they're getting too big. And so I'm working on turning them into a textbook to go along with the slideshow. This slideshow you have is normally a 3-hour slideshow. I had to cut it from 150 slides down so I could do it in an hour and a half, which he said they were going to turn off the lights at 4 o'clock, but I can talk in the dark. So anyway, it's still 90-some slides, so I'll try and get through it quick. So I am going to talk about, well, I've got Horsted's book and some of his photos, so it's like a community ed. I've done it so long that now it's one price and you get 2 people. I've been discounted, and now I'm discounted because I have to take off where he can't come. So that's fine for me. I am not shy too much. I just get nervous beforehand. So anyway, let's just take this, think about this for the thought for today. Over here, Lamper's down. So we're going to talk about Custer in the Hills. So we're not going to go into whether it was right or wrong, but we'll mention some things on here. I don't like to stand up in front, so you guys watch the slide. I pace around. I got a new one of these, so it should work all over the place. But anyway, this is Custer in the Hills. Okay, and that all started 150 years ago. At least the expedition. But the planning for the expedition actually started a lot longer than that. About the time the first fur trappers came into the area, tales of gold came out. Gold over in those hills over there. Now you might hear about the Black Hills, but you got to be careful about it because sometimes the mountains over in Wyoming are called the Black Hills also. So be careful. Wyoming likes to tag a lot of our stories, like the 7 Swedes. They say it happened over there. It's supposed to happen here in the Black Hills and a few other things they like to try and steal. But anyway, so in 1873, the government comes out and says, what's over there? Just what is the reason? So what's the reason for the Black Hills? And this is right here, basically, the Black Hills, around the 1870s. This is the last great blank spot of the map of the United States. They know everything. They've been from the East Coast to California. And this spot has always been avoided because Lewis and Clark, they tried making the highway to the West Coast up the Missouri River, which is 150 miles away. And then later on, when they have the overland, the Oregon Trail, that's 150 miles south of here. So when people went west, they were going around the Black Hills. And then suddenly, this is the last great place in the United States. They'd already been mining up in Alaska before anything happened here. So don't say that Alaska was the big rush. Don't mention that the California gold rush, especially my daughter. She hates that. Talk about California. It's just, okay. So, before 1873, there were some things that were happening, but in 1873, how many of you guys know around here it gets real dry in the summertime and sometimes we go through a drought? Well, their drought started in the late 60s, and it goes through cycles around here, about every 14 years or so. And along with this drought, the farmers started not growing anything or growing half of it. And then the Rocky Mountain locust came, the flood of grasshoppers. They're locusts anyway, by the way, not grasshoppers. And they ate the other half that the farmers were growing. And then this leads to a chain reaction that winds up leading to what's called the financial panic of 1873. And with this, it was worse than 1929 here in the United States because there's only 50 million people in the United States, not 139 million. And within a year, 1 to 2 million people are out of work. And then the eyes of Washington. Grant administration is in there, and he's in political trouble. Great military leader because he had good subordinates. Once he gets talked into being president, his advisors are scamming the country. And Grant wants the eyes of Washington, eyes of the population off of Washington. How do I do that? And then finally, because the military is out for revenge because of the Red Cloud's War of 1868-69 that leads up to the Fort Laramie Treaty, or 1866 to 60, finally ratified in 1867-68 for the Fort Laramie Treaty, where they gave up the Bozeman Trail, which, by the way, was not even in Sioux territory. Did you know that? According to the Treaty 1851, that was Crow territory, not Sioux, but the Sioux were in there fighting to prevent the white men from going through there. Just a side note. And then, by this time, all these tales of gold and wealth in the Black Hills have been coming out. Tales of these gold coming out. So the government's sitting there, how can I fix all these problems? The drought, the locusts, the eyes of Washington, and the military wants revenge against the Sioux for losing it because of the politicians. And then there's that one little 4-letter word, G-O-L-D, has been seeping out and seeping out and seeping out. So, the government decides it needs to check out the hills. Civic groups and individuals are pressing all over the country to open up the Black Hills of the Black Hills of the Sioux, specifically, because they've heard these tales coming out. Okay? And so decisions are made in the year 1874. Okay? Why the Army? 1874, it was decided that an Army expedition to the Black Hills was desirable and necessary. Well, some of the reasons. There is a strong probability that Custer was sent into the hills to precipitate the war that the Army believed was coming. Some letters written just before that time, mainly by Sheridan, indicate that there was a concern that sending a military expedition into the Black Hills would cause this war to start. Also, there is very little doubt that the move into the hills was a scout towards locating a suitable place for the establishment of a military post. They actually had orders to come in there and find a place. 1857, a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant Governor K. Warren led an expedition around the Black Hills. And at the end of it, he said, the Sioux are numerous, they will protect that area, and we're going to have a war with them, so let's have a war. And the best way to start a war is to build a post in and around the Black Hills. And you know where he suggested? He said, put it at this mountain of theirs called Bear Butte. What do we have there now? Fort Meade is there now. In 1857, he predicted, build a fort there, and build a fort and they will come. Okay? General Sheridan is in command, overall command in Chicago. Terry is command of Dakota Territory, and Ord is command of the Department of the Platte, Nebraska. Okay? Presidential connection. Now, there's a lot behind this. I'm cutting most of this out. There is also speculation, and almost proven, that President Grant decided that Custer should be the one to lead the expedition with the mission of finding the gold in the area and getting it publicized. Custer loved being in print. Okay? He loved being in print. Okay? In effect, Grant was deliberately sending in a trusted subordinate to start the rush and keep the eyes of the nation off of Washington. G-O-L-D. Nobody's going to think about what Grant's doing in Washington, D.C. when there's G-O-L-D laying around in the ground. You just have to go in, pick it up, put it in your pocket, and go. So he says, Custer, go in there and find it. Also look for a place for a fort. The Sioux continued. Why the Army? Well, the Sioux, after the Treaty of 1868, had continued to raid on whites and other tribes like the Pawnee, the Massacre Canyon in 1873. These are all treaty violations. They agreed not to do this. There's not a one-way violating treaties here. In an effort to subdue these raids, a military post entered close to the Black Hills was proposed in 1857. Remember Warren. 1857 is also when they established Fort Randall on the Missouri River on the other side of the reservation area. Army reasoning for the trip. So the Army comes up with their reasoning for the trip. A much-needed recon of the area. It was perfectly legal due to the Treaty of 1868, which it was because it said it could send in the officer of the government to inspect the area. The Army was an officer of the government. Civilian reaction once the proposal was published. Westerners, all for it, pro-expansion, anti-Indian. Easterners grew up with the leather stocking tails. Leave the noble red man alone. So about a third of the country was for it, about 2/3 were against it. Don't go in there, leave it alone. Okay? The Amerindians is a new term that they've suddenly come up with in the last year. But anyway, Native Americans, they called it the Thieves' Road. Who would you expect? Now you're told that Rapid City comes and says to me that there's a problem in my house. And they need someone to come in and inspect it. So we need to come in and check out your yard. Yeah, no problem. So I get up the next morning, I'm in my bathrobe, my flip-flops that I got from my brother, and drinking coffee. Ding dong, I open the door. And who do I expect out to see? A couple engineers or somebody, with a clipboard. What if I open the door and all these people are standing out there? And they're not all. He's standing out there. And they're standing out there. And they're standing out there. Oh, and let's not forget animal control. So I expected 1 or 2 people to show up, but what happens is 1,100 men show up. So maybe you know what Native Americans might have felt like when they said we're going to come in and inspect, and now suddenly you've got an army. This is one of the biggest army expeditions that's been formed in years, since 1869, when Randall's expedition went through. And then there's a letter that comes back to haunt them from it, written in 1872 by the Secretary of Interior. Now the Army and the Secretary and the Department of the Interior don't get along because when the Indian Bureau first started out, it was part of the Army. And then government took it away and gave it over to the Department of Interior. So the Army is supposed to be the police force, but the people that make the decisions are now the Department of the Interior. And they don't get along. But Delano here, he writes out in, and I'm just paraphrasing some of the things in the letter, I am inclined to think that the occupation of this region of the country is not necessary to the happiness and prosperity of the Indians, deemed important to have it freed as early as possible from Indian occupation. I should then deem it advisable to extinguish the claim of Indians and open the territory to the occupation of whites. That's him. 1872. He stated in his letter, Americans and representatives of the Dakota Territory felt that there was too much land allotted to too few Sioux. It's estimated the number was from 15 to 25,000 in 1872. And the existence of the mineral and natural resources in the area were necessary for the white population, or for the United States government anyway. And then the financial panic, that financial panic in 1873 hit, right after he wrote this letter. So now the government's kind of panicking. So Delano's already mentioned about taking this land away. There's those tails of gold coming out of it. And suddenly, the financial panic of 1873 hits. And it cripples the nation. It actually flows over from the United States worldwide to an extent. It has been widely speculated since that time that the Delano letter and other previous reports and rumors regarding the wealth of the Black Hills brought about the expedition the following year. We have this guy. He's still here, by the way. He was a member of the Custer expedition. Charles Winthrop. I can never hardly say it. He wrote in his book, he wrote a book. It's called I Fought with Custer. And I want to write that down. It's mostly about the Battle of Little Bighorn, but he also mentions and writes about the expedition that he was part of. Okay? Now and again, Indians would show up with little bags of gold and mysteriously hint that they had found them over there somewhere, over there in the Black Hills country. I fought with Custer. He was also present at the Battle of the Little Bighorn as a sergeant. He won the Medal of Honor there. He was one of the sharpshooters that guarded the water carriers that went down to it. He moved to Meade after he got out of the 7th Cavalry, and he worked for Homestead for 30-some years. He's buried in the National Cemetery over here at grave A239. There's a cemetery, there's his grave. So one of the members of Custer Expedition is still here. There's a couple others that we'll talk about as we go along, but he survived. The second one is Private Theodore Ewart. And I have his diary. Okay? He had extensive military service. He was an officer in the Civil War. And then he got broken down for gambling and drinking with the men. And then he enlisted in the 7th Cavalry as a private. He'll work his way up to a sergeant. He was there with the expedition. He mustered out about 2 months before the expedition was over. Okay, so he missed the Battle of the Little Bighorn. He was discharged 2 months before as a sergeant. He died in Quincy, Illinois, and is buried there. He rose to become the Assistant Adjutant General of Illinois in 1889. But I found this diary. They were going to sell it cheap at the Rapid City Public Library. They're getting rid of old books. You know where the best way to get these books? About the Black Hills, anything about the Black Hills. Probably. Yeah, that's what Marty tries to do all the time. Garage sales, people. Garage sales. Or you can go to thriftbooks.com. They're good. So ordered, General Alfred, the headquarters of the Department of Dakota in St. Paul, formally ordered the exploration of the Black Hills, or the exploration of the Black Hills on June 8, 1874. Lieutenant Colonel George R. A. Custer was given command of the expedition from Fort Abraham Lincoln, Dakota Territory. Custer expedition was given orders to explore the region and evaluate possible sites for a fort in or near the Black Hills, which was allowed by the treaty. He just had a lot of people with him. He did not take the entire 7th Cavalry. There's 12 troops to the 7th Cavalry. He only took 10. 2 were left at the one at Fort Rice and the other at Fort Abraham Lincoln. This is the real commander. You all should know him here. What's his name?
Sturgis.
Colonel Sturgis. He was actually a major general in the Civil War too. He fought at South Mountain. Okay? Contrary to popular opinion, Custer was not the commanding officer of the 7th Cavalry. He was only the second in command, the executive officer. Well, why wasn't Sturgis around? Interesting. He was on detached duty for recruiting horses in Kentucky for 11 years. Well, what's behind all that? Well, there is a lot more behind that. The horses had to be military grade. You couldn't just take John plow horse. And they had to have the right color. He matched horses to troops. So you had like the gray horse troop with Custer. The horses nationwide were organized by color and military grade for identification during a fight. You could look over and see the color of the horses and knew this was this troop, this was this troop over here. Makes sense, right? Took me a long time to find out about that. And later, he's in command. The old fort is in command at Fort Meade, and this little town here is named after it. I wonder if he knew the motorcycles were coming. Anyway, these are some of the people. Okay. The thing about the 7th Cavalry is the Army made a mistake because there is a pro and an anti-Custer in the regiment. They took one regiment plus a few other soldiers and civilians and that, and put them together and said, go do this. Well, there's a lot in here. A lot of the officers were Custer's friends and or relatives or married to them into the family. The other side of it was they resented that Custer bringing those people in and or they didn't like Custer. You either hate Custer or you like Custer. So anybody sitting in here, you probably go on one side of the fence or the other. You either like him. He should have lost. He should have been captured at least 3 times during the Civil War because he wanted to charge all the time, not thinking. Right? So I'm not going to tell you what I think about him. But anyway, here we have Benteen. Benteen was a colonel in the Civil War, but he's only a captain in the 7th Cavalry. They got brought back to their regular rank, not their brevet rank, which was honorary. And then this would lead to problems when the final reports of the trips were written. We'll talk about that too. And then this is Major Tilford. Anybody ever heard of Tilford? You been on the interstate? Hello! And the other guy's really interested. So Lieutenant Tilford, he commanded one side of the one battalion of the 7th Cavalry then. But this other guy's really interested because his name is Forsyth. He was the leader at Breacher's Island fight with the Cheyenne in Colorado. So he gets pulled into it. He commands the other side of Custer's campaign. Fort Abraham Lincoln, that's where they started out from, but they were not all there. 4 companies of it were down at Fort Rice, or about half the regiment was at Fort Rice, which is about a day's march south of Abraham Lincoln, just into the North Dakota border from South Dakota. Now, Army on the move, crossing the plain was not like the Hollywood version. You all seen the wagon trains, right? They're all in one straight line across the prairie. Nobody did that. The pioneers didn't do that. They only got in one straight line when they went through what's called in military terms a choke point, when it was only too narrow to have wagons go next to each other. The Army marched like this. They marched like a block. This is defensive. If they get attacked on the front, if you're in one long line, those people at the end might take an hour to get to the front to help fight. as you march like a block, when you get attacked on any side, front, back, rear, you have a whole lot of people to fight while the others don't have that far to go to join the battle. So this is, the Prairie Schooners did this, the Oregon Trail did this, and the Army did this. Okay, one of the most famous pictures of the Custer expedition is what's called, some people call it Pearl Necklace, where they're coming down in single line, all those wagons. Okay? But they only did that when they had to. They didn't do that when they moved out on the prairie. So it would move as a square or a block. Marching orders. Page 6 of Ewart's diary, it says, Custer's assignment of the command staff to his favorites or relatives, as the reader can see, all the pain situations in the family. He didn't like Custer very well. Okay? The wagon train to move 4 abreast or less if the location of the ground does not admit the moving of that number. 1 company to move in advance, 4 companies of cavalry to move on either flank, the 2 battalions, 2 companies of infantry to cover the rear of the train, and the last company of cavalry followed behind, about a half mile behind it. Okay? There's no mention in his notes, though, of the spare horses, mules, or cattle they took along. Custer took along 300 cattle. What's interesting to note is when he got back to Fort Abraham Lincoln 2 months later, he had most of those cattle still with him. They found more than enough to eat in the Black Hills and in the prairie. Again, this is the book. You need to get this book. He's come out with another one here to celebrate the 150th year. The makeup. I'm just going to go through this real quick. 1,100 men. Many would die in the Battle of Little Bighorn. 10 companies of cavalry. 2 companies of infantry. So you got 10 companies of cavalry, and you get 2 companies of infantry to act as guards. I just always thought that was funny. But they were supposed to be guards for the wagon. But they marched behind. There was a battery of 3 Gatling guns and 1 3-inch rifled artillery piece. Custer was actually offered this also before he went to fight the Battle of Little Bighorn. He turned it down then. He had 61 native scouts. He had a scientific corps, including the photographer that took this picture and many others, about 80 pictures he took. An engineering department headed by a Captain Ludlow. He was actually a colonel in the Civil War. And then there was a scientific corps, including the head guy, a Professor Winchell, from the University of Minnesota. Other makeup, a collection of aides, including Fred Grant. He's the president's son. He's 24 years old. At the time, he was an aide to Sheridan, and he was probably sent along as a spy for Grant to find out what Custer was doing. There was civilian teamsters, civilian guides. Charlie Reynolds, Boston Custer, first time out west. He's a guide. Next time Custer goes out west, he takes Boston Custer and his nephew, both from the east. Of course, that didn't work out for them. So this is Boston Custer up here. This is Ludlow, the engineer. You had a medical department, civilians, including the cook of the Sutler, Sarah Campbell, the first non-native woman into the Black Hills. She is still here. She's buried in Galena Cemetery, Vinegar Hill Cemetery. Okay? And it brings along 2 practical miners, Horatio Ross and William McKay. Which is interesting because everybody talks about Ross, and McKay has disappeared from history. And actually, in some places, they've got his name wrong. They call him Fred McKay. There was about 110 wagons, Studebakers, by the way. A large herd of 300 cattle, medium, not large. Most of them go back to Fort Abraham Lincoln. So I consider them the first tourists of the hills. And then this is the photographer, Illingworth, and this is Tom Custer. Interesting thing about Tom Custer. George Custer never got a Medal of Honor. Tom Custer got 2. He's only one of 19 men in the United States history that has 2 Medals of Honor. He won them both at the end of the Civil War by charges. The medical department was presided over by Captain Williams, with Dr. Ellens and another one that the author didn't name at the time, okay, who was an acting surgeon, Davis. Okay. We carried supplies for 2 months and ammunition enough for 20 or 30 engagements. They were each issued, to start with, 200 rounds of ammunition. The men anticipated trouble. The command was camped outside the fort for 10 days before the start of the movement, just to get the men used to camping out. They departed on July 2nd. We moved out with our wagons 4 abreast, covered Army Studebakers, each with 3 teams of guarded mules. We had civilian mule skinners. The infantry was their special guard. We had 300 head of beef. It was a big outfit, 1,000 men, horses, 700 mules, and 300 steers. This is Windolph. Okay? According to the men, according to Ewart, believed they were headed into a major fighting campaign. We all believed that scarcely half our number would return. How many would return? Who of our command would remain in the Black Hills, buried? Every member of the camp is expecting a battle within the next few days, as war and warpath are about the only words that can talk about. The first day they did 15 miles. Teachers and mules getting used to the march. Generally traveled 15 to 20 miles per day. The forward company had to build the road when necessary. This is important. Okay, I'll just jump ahead a little bit. The Army and its 2 expeditions of the Black Hills are what established the road network to and through the Black Hills. They had to make the roads. Custer's men had to make the original roads. When the Dodge-Jenny expedition a year later comes through, they have to improve those roads. As Custer comes through in the hot time, Dodge came through in the wet time, and he had to move the roads because Custer built them in the dry areas, and when Dodge came through, those dry areas are now mud. Reveille was now established by order. Look at that time. You're getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes in the Black Hills, at 2 o'clock in the morning, some of the wagons were still getting in by trying to go through the rough trails through the Black Hills. Okay? They complained about the officers getting special treatment. They said as soon as they went into camp, them soldiers had to put up the tents for the officers, and then they got to do their own thing and then take care of the horses. So they complained that the Custer expedition, at least from a lot of the enlisted, that it was one big party for the officers and a hard endurance for the soldiers. So about 17 days later, Private Cunningham came down with a case of acute dysentery on the 13th of July. So for several days he has this dysentery. He was checked and the doctor said he was fit for duty. He went back on the 17th and Allen marked him fit for duty again. On the 18th he fainted and fell off his horse and was again taken to the ambulance. Ewart, on duty as an orderly trumpeter, decided to go see him in one of the medical ambulances. He found John laying on his back, his person exposed to every passerby and dying. My first step was to the tent of the chief medical officer, Dr. Williams. Found him lying on his bed in a drunk sleep. The doctor was drunk. The doctor could not be awakened, and Ewart reported to his company the situation. Custer finally heard about it, sent for Williams and then for Dr. Allen. This drunken specimen of doctorism came and claimed Cunningham was not dying. So he gave him some medicine, a few opium pills, and left. That evening, 4 of us volunteered to set up with him. Poor Cunningham paid the debt of nature and died purely through the neglect of the men claiming to be doctors, men who were paid by the government to look after the health of its soldiers and who only managed to drink and the brandy furnished by the government for the use of the sick soldiers. This is the deaths caused during the Custer expedition through the Black Hills was caused by the medical department, except for one, which we'll talk about now. Ewart says, a large hospital tent was brought along and stretched out every day for use of General Custer and staff as a dining room.
Whether it was intended for use by the government or whether it was issued for the accommodation of the sick is left to the judgment of the reader. Custer, for transportation of these specimens of animals and reptiles and anything else found, plus conveyance for Sarah Campbell, he took the best wagon and selected that to carry his specimens. The sick men for whose benefit all the ambulances were taken had to ride in a rickety, broken-down concern. After this day, the title of doctor was dropped by the members of H Company, and either one of them who talked about Butcher Allen or Drunken Williams titles they richly deserved. This is Indian Car Mountain. I want you to look. This is the picture, 1874. This is the picture in 1974. What do you notice? Trees. Since the United States government came in and been taking care of the national forest, they've let the trees grow. So people have asked me, what did the miners see when they came into the Black Hills? They saw this. They saw the rocks exposed. They saw by looking over here at Cowboy Hill. What's Cowboy Hill anyway? That's M Hill. That's the real name is Cowboy Hill. Okay. It was a long time before that M was put up there. But anyway, we had that fire up there. Notice there's no trees there, right? If you go down and see the 1988 fire at Custer State Park, you'll see the hair burn. It's just bare. You can see the rocks all over the place. Miners come in and look at that. Nowadays, 100 years later, you can't look up there and see the rocks exposed, so the miners couldn't see it. But don't think that miners wouldn't have gone anywhere. People have told me, well, I'm going to go up on this hill. And this hill, I've been looking at it all the time. So I'm going to climb up on this hill, and then I get up on top, I beat my chest, and this is Bill Hill. I am the first one to climb it, and I jump off of the rock and go behind the tree. There's an empty beer can and some used toilet paper. They've been everywhere around these hills, okay? Private Roller and Turner had been having a long-time feud. On the morning of the 21st, Roller went to check on his horse and found that it had been hobbled. Somebody put a chain around one leg, wrapped it around another leg, and then put it to a back leg. Roller threatened whoever did it and said the person was an SOB. Turner come out of his tent, and they'd been having a bad feud, and claimed Roller meant it for him. Roller denied it, but Turner reached for his pistol. Another tale, another soldier wrote, he reached for his carbine on his saddle. Well, he went to reach for it. There was a problem, though. The problem being, Turner put his weapon on the left side rather than the normal right side hip. So he goes to grab his right side hip, there ain't no gun there. So he's trying to draw first, so now he has to change over and grab the other side. Well, Roller wasn't going to stand for that, so this simple little accident caused him to lose his life. For finding his revolver on either side made it necessary for him to change hands, and the delay through this gave Roller the advantage, who, not ready to die in order that the other might live, also pulled out his, cocked and fired at the other, draining into the ground on the first shot. Turner was placed in an ambulance and died on the line of march from the 21st to the camp at Indian Car Mountain on the 22nd. Incidentally, Roller was arrested. He spent the rest of the expedition in chains tied up behind one of the wagons. And then he was taken to, some say Yankton, others say someplace in Wyoming. He was put on trial and he was let loose after 30 minutes. Justifiable homicide. But these two men that died roughly around the same time are buried. At 4 o'clock, we went into camp at Indian Car. Just before sundown, Cunningham and Turner were sewn in canvas, and the 10 companies of cavalry were drawn up in line. And as the corpses of the two men were lifted in the ambulance, slow march to the elevated knoll on which the grave had been dug by the fatigue party. They filled up the grave and leveled it up to the surface of the earth, after which a large fire was built over the spot to obliterate any traces of the ground having been disturbed. There's just 4 military honors. That's their graves. Cunningham is on the left, Hunter is on the right. So they're the first two that are buried, and since they're inside IndyCar Mountain, they're inside the Black Hills. So they're the first two of Custer's expedition that dies on this. So we have two buried in the Black Hills, which is interesting because you know that the creek that is just down below it is named, it's called Soldier Creek now. Wonder why. From there, on the 24th, they entered the Black Hills proper from the west and hit Floral Valley. So this is by the Black Hills Time reporter at the time. But on the 25th, they crossed through Floral Valley. They entered the Red Man's Sanctum Sanctorum. Large stacks of teepee poles were found. So the Native Americans had been in there, but they were found. There were stakes driven in the sod, told us that here their hides and furs had been stretched. And in some of the Custer pictures, you can actually see the teepee poles if you look real closely. Floral Valley, I believe, is one of the most beautiful spots on God's green earth. My pen fails me in describing the flowers of this valley. Okay, the soldiers reached from their saddles and picked the abundance of flowers and decorated their horses with the flowers. And in Castle Valley, high precipice rise on either hand, several hundred feet. The fields are pine-clad and magnificent, resembling castles from which the name is described. I forgot you were taping this. Got a good picture of my back. So on the 26th is when they crossed into Castle Creek Valley, and road construction through the Black Hills became very, very difficult. At times they had to send 2 or 3 other cavalry troops up there to help. And here we go, 100 years. This is coming down through the valley. So this is 1874, 1974. And again, what do you notice? Well, there's a road here. Custer didn't build that. But it's the trees. The trees have come in. And that's why since about 2005 with the Jasper fire and all that, we've been having fires in the Black Hills, and they're really worried about it because they let the forest go. So the answer is the trees. And this is possibly the most famous picture. Some people call this the string of pearls. It's the wagons coming down through. And then this is 100 years later. Notice the pine trees have grown up in there. So and I'll tell you about Mr. Horsted, when he was doing this, he took the Forest Service up there to this spot, and he convinced them to cut these trees so you could look down at it again. And this is what it looks like now. This is what it was. They cut down. There's also something interesting in here. Pine is soft wood, right? And it just goes away after a little bit. Well, what's that? And what's that? They're still there. 100 years, 150 years now. And they're still there. And again, these two pictures match them up. They're there. Still there. They've rotted a little bit, but those pine trees are still there. That's probably why we still have a lot of cabins, abandoned cabins in the hills. Those trees still last a long time. On July 27th, they're coming down to their camp just above Deerfield Lake, where you can go visit now. But anyway, they come down here and they find a village, a small village of Native Americans. Bloody Knife pointed out, and at a sign, they, the scouts, ran to their ponies, mounted them, and started down the valley at breakneck speed. They discovered a faint blue smoke curling up into the sky. It was evident that where there was smoke came from, there was an Indian camp. Bloody Knife asked Custer permission to go kill the Sioux. Bloody Knife is a ripper, he's not Sioux. Okay? Custer declined. So he came down the valley, and down to where the bottom of Deerfield Lake is, that's where they found the village. Okay? So he captured a portion of one stag tribe of Blackfeet Sioux. The chief himself was among them captured. And one of those also captured was one stabbed one of his women, or squaw or wife, and she was the daughter of Red Cloud. But they came down this way. And Custer is going to have his camp here twice at Deerfield, at the bottom of Deerfield Lake, because once they moved to Deerfield, they tried crossing over Reynolds and Slate Prairie and couldn't find enough water, so they turned back, camped here again, and then from here they headed south. What's interesting about this is Custer's idea during this whole time was to go to the southern hills. Supposedly, some of the scouts with him told him there was a wide valley in the southern hills. So that's why he went to the south, but it's still kind of confusing why he went to the Custer area the way he did. Here is Custer's camp right here. Deerfield Lake is just around the corner down here. Okay, so this is the camp, and this is a 2000 picture of it. There is, well, you can't see it there. There's a turnoff over here because of the fishing down here. But there's another turnoff here. There used to be a big log sign down there saying Custer's Camp of the date and all that other stuff. This picture is probably the second most famous one of it. And here's Custer's Camp. There's his soul. This wagon here is a photographer's wagon, and you can walk right now to this spot. They have a sign there with this picture on it. You can follow a trail around to it. All right. This is 100 years later, and again, what do you notice? The trees. The trees have grown and covered everything. So the miners who look up here say, oh, that looks interesting, let's go check it out. Over here, you go, what the heck's over there? I don't know. This is Horsted's picture of 2000 compared to it. And notice the trees have even grown into them more. Okay? But you can walk over there right to this spot, and you can take this picture. There's a sign there, and it tells you about this. It's the only one, though, except down in the Custer area itself. This is another picture of his camp, what it looks like now. Moving on. Anybody ever seen this place? This is the end of Gillette Prairie. This is also called as the Gillette Prairie Stage Station. It was on the Cheyenne to Deadwood stage line because Custer went right through this valley. This is looking to the south. This is looking to the north. Custer came right down through this valley here. He went that way to Hill City, towards Hill City, but he didn't go to Hill City. And he came down from this way. And this was a stage stop for about a year or so, and the building's still standing. West of Highway 385. A good thing we had one staff with us for the next 3 or 4 days because it was hard to find our way through those narrow valleys and canyons. Color, notice the date, July 30th. Color has been found by the miners. 3031. This is actually in camp where Custer City is. And it's on the east side of Custer City. So if you're in Custer, you want to be on the east side. This is where the military camped. This is where Custer's camp was. Stayed there 2 days. In camp there, more color is found, and Custer climbs Black Elk, or Harney Peak. He actually had to climb it 3 times because he saw this one peak. They climbed up to it. When they got to the top, I'm here, and then he looked ahead of him, and there's a higher peak. And he got down and climbed that one. And he got, I'm here, and he looked ahead, and then there was the true one ahead of him. So he had to do it 3 times. He actually wrote his name up there. You guys know Watson Parker, the author of a lot of Deadwood and Black Hill stuff? His grandfather, or his father, I think it was grandfather, was on a hike up Black Elk Peak and found something in a crack. He opened it up. It was a shell, a rifle shell, and he pulled out a piece of paper and it had Custer's signature on it. And that's what Watson Parker got interested in the Black Hills. In camp on the 30th, we traveled 10 miles nearly southeast from our last camp. We're in a wide grassy valley. This is Custer, where Custer is located in the town. The valley subsequently received the name of Custer Park. The gold seekers who accompanied this expedition report the finding of gold along the gravel and sand along this valley. This is Ludlow's report, his official report. He wrote that into it. And again, this is coming down, so this is up at Gillette Prairie. Custer came down from that direction coming towards us as they march down towards the Custer area. So they're in the 30th, 31st. 2 days down at Custer City before they move about 5 miles down, further down. This is a historic place because this is the first baseball game played in the Black Hills by units of the 7th Cavalry. The teams were made up of the left column and the right column companies plus the band. The right wing picked 9 players, calling themselves the Active Baseball Club of Fort Lincoln, Dakota Territory, played the Athletic Baseball Club of Fort Rice, Dakota Territory. In the first of a series of games, they played 2 games. Score, Actives 11, Athletic 6. The umpire was a Mr. Tenpenny, veteran surgeon of the 7th Cavalry. Time of the game, 2 hours, 25 minutes. Write that down, all you baseball fans. The thing about it is the team that lost complained and said because the surgeon, the veterinarian surgeon, was stationed at Fort Abraham Lincoln, he was prejudiced in the game. Side note. Of the players, of the 18 players here, 5 were discharged before the Little Bighorn battle. 3 were killed at the battle. 6 survived and 2 were wounded. 6 survived and 2 were on detached duty and missed the fight. So of those that made the historic game, 3 were killed at the battle and 2 were wounded. You know that, did you? See, that's what. Come here, too. I'll stand over here so you can't see me. And the first champagne dinner is held, which was held at Custer City. While Custer was gone, he was climbing the mountain. So some of the officers got together and set up a tent on this hillside, which is actually at Montgomery and North 8th Street, corner of those two in Custer City. And according to Wendell, Colonel Fred Grant, the colonel used to get a little tipsy. According to Ewart, that evening, the champagne supper held without Custer, who got exploring, became rather boozy. I had better omit all the names, only assuring you that Lieutenant Colonel Fred Grant was one of the party and not the most sober one either. That is the intersection. There's the sign. It was held on this hill. That's where it was. Cool. Yeah, the rocks are here, the rocks are here. So in this little area, that's looking down 8th Street. Custer Camp is over here. You can just barely make out the tents behind them. That's Custer. And there's Ben T. So this is Grant. He was older than that, but he's only 24 years old. That's because they all had beards back then. Electric razors were charged. And then we have the founder of gold. But as you notice, they've been locating gold all the time coming down through the hills. Okay. But this is Ross. And they have a monument to him at the courthouse in, not the old courthouse, but across the street from the new courthouse. They have a monument to him. But they also have, forgot to mention about William T. McKay, the other miner. He kind of disappears. I even asked the people at Custer about him. What happened to him? They don't know. But sometimes he's called Fred McKay also. There's 2 posters down at the Custer's discovery site of gold, and one of them calls him William, and the other calls him Fred. Custer's camp on the August, that's when they moved down to their permanent camp, just down by the stockade. And here is a stream in the Black Hills. But on the 2nd, the expedition was camped in an open area east of the present town of Custer. Ross made the initial discovery of gold along French Creek. Well, they've been finding them already. But Custer wasted little time in dispatching the news to Fort Laramie, Wyoming territory. I like the August 2nd. You know why? It's easy to remember because this is 2 years to the day Wild Bill Hickok is shot and dead. I just go with the date. So Ross and McKay find a lot of color-rich gravel soil from the grassroots down. Custer exploring, climbing Blackout Peak on the 31st first, and on the 2nd he's tried to take an expedition down to the Badlands and couldn't get through the Black Hills to get out to the Badlands, turned around. August 2nd, command still in camp. There is much talk of gold and industrious search for it in the making. This is Ludlow's report. I saw General Custer's tent that the miner said he had obtained during the day. Under a strong reading glass, it resembles small pinheads and fine scales of irregular shape, perhaps 30 in number. The miners expressed themselves quite confident that if they could reach bedrock in the valley at a favorable place, plenty could be obtained by the pan. And again, from Ludlow's official report, this is his official report. Supposedly, I'm trying to get this from thrift books. They've got it, or they have it, but they don't have it right now. I don't know. They have it, but they don't have it. This is Charlie Reynolds. Okay, he's the one that brings message down from the Black Hills down to Fort Laramie. Okay. It's during the 2nd recon to the Badlands that failed, and on the 3rd, Custer went south. He goes all the way down, almost to Edgemont at the mouth of Red Canyon, where later on a military post is going to be established, Camp Collier. And he's turned loose. Okay? He's given a dispatch bag and said, go to Fort Laramie. So he's going on the other side. It's about 150 miles down. Okay? If you go to Guernsey, it's 200 miles. Okay? But anyway, Charlie Reynolds, the scout, who's later going to die at the Battle of Little Bighorn, he did a 150-mile ride, supposedly, to Fort Laramie from where Custer turned him loose. He traveled during the night so he could avoid any Native Americans during the daytime, and he arrived down there. And then the report. The report goes out by telegraph. Custer's reports were telegraphed to General Terry in St. Paul. After reading through descriptions of beautiful valleys filled with lush grasses, flowing streams of clear, cold water, wild berries, and flowers, Terry finally arrived at the core of the 3,500-word message. How long do you think it took him to type that and take that out? It's an open line. This is a party line. Anyone on this telegraph line can hear this message. It's an open line. It's not secret. Why did they send it by telegraph? Well, it sounds like they wanted to get word out because one small paragraph, about 50 words. Gold has been found at several places, and it is the belief of those who are giving their attention to this subject that it will be found in paying quantities. I have on my table 40 or 50 small particles of pure gold, most of it obtained today from one handful of earth. The civilian the telegrapher at Fort Laramie at that time, at least for the next year, or after the winter, was a guy by the name of John W. Ford. I wonder if he sent it out. But this is an open party line. It's that 4-letter word, G-O-L-D, has been found. Newspapers in the United States and around the world spread the word of gold discovery by the last week of August. Custer is still in the Black Hills. But newspapers are publishing gold has been found. Matter of fact, Bismarck puts out a paper, and a copy of it was I saw in one of the tables out there. It's for 12 August. Bismarck, it says gold in the Black Hills. Custer's stuck in Nemo, trying to get out. But the nation knows he found gold. Was this because of the message to Terry or something else? Back at French Creek on 5 August, Horatio Ross, 20 men, and Sarah Campbell drew up papers and staked their claim. Sarah Campbell got claim number 7 below discovery. First woman in the Black Hills to get a claim. The trouble is when the company moved on, now nobody's working the claim that's considered abandoned. August 5th, the miners in the meantime have not been idle. They report success in both quartz and gulch. I had occasion to accompany him, Major Tilford, to Custer Gulch, where the miners then were prospecting. I watched their proceedings with the deepest interest as the question, do the Black Hills contain gold or not, would have to be decided in this gulch or not at all. Mr. Ross was watching the dirt. A shout of joy, and boys, I've got it, told us that the question was decided. Telegraph wires would, in a very short space of time, inform the people of the United States. Gold was found, that is certain. I had it with my own 2 eyes for proof. This is on the 5th, so it's a possibility he had the wrong date down on here when he wrote his diary. Or he just remembered it at a later date. This is Calamity Peak, just south of, or just east of Custer. And it was around the bend over here where gold was discovered. So this is just before you get to Custer's permanent camp. And there is a new sign that was put up last year. And it used to be a wooden sign. But it's got these pictures on here, which are really interesting. So this is French Creek. You see that? Big stream, right? Big river. Problem with that is it's very tiny. It tends to get very, very shallow during the summer, late summertime, and almost dry up. And they're trying to dig this dirt and wash it with that little bit of water. It's a very, very poor mining area. But this is the sign that used to be there, and it was hidden in plain sight. It's right next to the highway, but hardly anybody knows about it, that it being there. And this is the road, so the highway moves along from Custer, and suddenly it comes to 2 little hills. You go through that, on the other side is Custer's permanent camp, big sign there. Well, before you get there, there's a dirt road off to the left, right over here. And right over here is where this sign is located, about 40 feet from the main highway. You just drive by it, don't realize they're at First Discovery Gold. Where Custer's camp is located, that's not First Discovery Gold. First Discovery Gold is about 200 yards upstream from that. And then they put up this new sign. So that's where the sign is. So next time you go across over French Creek, when you're in Custer area, go over that. You should see where all this, why we're all here. And then they put up this new sign. But what I like is, this is a picture taken, and it's taken from almost where the highway is nowadays. Right? And this is another tape. He moved his camera down further into the gully and then took it, and you can see this rock here. This is the same rock. I have looked for this rock for years. What happened to it? Well, it's hidden in plain sight. There's the rock. Here's the other picture of a rock with the rock behind it. This is looking up the valley, so he moved down here. This is the road. And that rock right there is this rock right here, and it's also right in the third picture. You just can't see it because it's hidden in plain sight. It's right behind that tree. So literally, this road, and where these gentlemen are standing, they're standing in the modern road now. I wonder what they would have thought about if they knew they were going to be standing in front of a road with a modern house behind it. So just another couple pictures of it. There's that rock, right underneath that tree. There it is. It's right at the turn of this road. I think this is American. I can't think of it. And it was on the tip of my lips, and then I think the glare right here blocked it out. But there's that rock. There's that rock. There's that rock. And we're right down here. These 2 guys here were standing right here where the highway, where the road is. But you have to go around this road, actually, to find where the original strike of gold was found, the exact spot, at least what they marked. And, oh, there's another rock over here. Where'd that go? It's right there. So those two historic rocks, they're still there. I, for a long time, thought that was this rock, but it's not. It's just so cool to find it. And this was taken from Harper's newspaper. But this is a picture of it, and I can take you right to this spot, although it's in the trees now. The trees have grown up here. But this is the tent line, and this tent right here, this is actually the very end of Custer's camp. This is not the middle of it, this is the end of it. Because it was right up from here where first gold was discovered. Just holler gold, gold a couple times and then we'll stampede. Gold fever is like taking dope. You're helpless when it strikes you. You know. Here is that line from the picture. And this is the very end of Custer. So Custer's camp actually spreads all the way down this valley towards down where the stockade is now, Stockade Lake. This is just the end of Custer's camp. And actually Custer's tent is located just over here, just outside of the picture. He had a very distinguished tent. He had a Sibley tent, which had a point on it, a round point on it, and it sticks out in some of the pictures. That was Custer's tent. He was the only one that had that. And again, this is the end of it. Custer, oh, this is the end over here. And looking over here, this is where first gold was found behind these trees. That's where the sign is. What's interesting also here, right here, there is a monument to Custer's camp, but right next to it is the soldier's grave from 1876. 2 years later, when the cavalry actually came down to the area to look with miners. But that's the marker. And this is, oh, I forgot. The arrow didn't work. This is Custer right here. He was at the very western edge of the camp. This is Custer's headquarters camp. It's now on the road that's across going over to some new construction they're building. And then this is the original marker of the highway. And then next to it is John Palmer's grave. He died in dysentery 2 years later when the Army, when the 7th Cavalry was back in there. And then here's the picture. This is 1974. This is 2023. Same picture. And again, notice all the soldiers over here. The soldiers were mostly on the far side over here, up and down the valley, on either side of the stream. So there is, where the highway is, there were soldiers camped on that also. This is the western edge. That's the last tent. Custer's camp right there. Right over here. So the rocks are here. See these? They're still here. But it's just, there's trees growing up. It's hard to get. Even then, there was trees under years ago. That's my picture. And this is the intersection. So Custer's tents were along here, and then ended just on the other side of this round building, right at the fence line where the two markers are, gravestone and the Custer mother. We're trying to move along here. Here's just some more pictures of it. It's on the other side of these trees is where that discovery sign was. And then soldiers were camped all along in here, and Custer was back over here. So Custer was just off to the side here where his tent was. So again, that look going across there. This is French Creek, not much water. But notice there's a rock sticking out here in a telephone pole. When you drive down the road, it comes down here, American, I can't remember the name of it, American Express Road or something like that. American Way, something like that. I can't remember. Jeez, why did this Alzheimer's hit me?
You know, when I turned 65, they sent me that card from AARP. I opened it up and I looked at the AARP card, and another one fell out. It said Alzheimer's card. And I don't know what I did with it. But if you see this rock, when you come in here, because right down in by this fence is a new sign that's just been put up. And there's that rock, and this is Discovery of Gold. The trouble with this is, it says Frank McKee here, I believe. They got two signs and two different first names. So I've asked Custer Historical Society to tell me what happened to the guys. And they did it. And then August 10th. So they're still in the Black Hills. They haven't even got out of the Nemo area. They haven't even tried finding them around the Nemo area. And the New York Tribune is writing stories about it. He says on the 30th day of July there was gold there, but it was merely a color, which could easily be made to pay if water were more plentiful. Remember, that string's real small. Goes on to say that color was found in the following days with up to 10 cents per pan, but time proves insufficient, however, to test them all or yet to define the limits of the gold. The cat was out of the bag. White civilization was on the march again, and nothing could stop it. That's what he said in his book. And this is taking a bit. This is the permanent camp. This was what was taken in 1874. This is 1974. So the difference. You can't lose the trees. And then finally they leave there on the 5th, or after the 5th on the 6th. The 6th they camp up by Deerfield, and then the 7th they go down to the Rochford area, just above Rochford, and Custer picture with him and the bear. Okay. So this is Bloody Knife, this is Ludlow, and this is Custer's aide or Batman or servant, Noonan. Several bear had been seen, and one had been killed by General Custer, Captain Ludlow, Bloody Knife, and Private John Noonan of G Company. Custer claimed a grizzly, but it was not a grizzly. Even later on, Bloody Knife said it was not a grizzly, but he wouldn't tell Custer that. Now I reassert that no grizzly bear was seen or killed in the Black Hills, but one bear, and that was a symbol. That's this one. General Custer, of course, wishes to magnify his discoveries to the fullest extent. Custer was moving northward when on the 9th, 10th, they turned east, apparently. So Custer's moving northward. And then suddenly, as he goes northward, it gets rougher and rougher, more trees, the hill gets steeper and all that, and he starts finding little gaps going to the east. And apparently he's decided, well, it's time to leave. He had found what he came for, or been ordered to find, maybe. And he suddenly turns to the east and winds up going down into the Nemo area. Now, he stopped about 15 miles or so south of where he was actually trying to find where the gold really was, which was the Valley of Deadwood Gulch. That's where the mother lode was. But he had found his gold down south, and he gets up, and finally he said, I'm not going any further, it's getting too rough. Ooh, here's an opening, let's cut across. Actually, he cut across and then around into some real bad stuff, and had to cut his way through. Wound up just south of where the town of Perry or Little Bay is. And made a camp there, and then wound his way coming down into Nemo. He gets down into Nemo and he gets stuck. Okay? But anyway, here we have this. This was in August, land of gold in August. He's still in the hills. They're just getting out of the hills. Custer's in the Nemo area from the 10th to the 13th, and he's trying to walk. He made 3 camps before finding Custer Gap. He got in there and he couldn't find a way to get out of the hills. And the further he went down through the valley of Nemo, where Nemo is located, it got steeper and steeper, and the walls on each side started to turn into basically castle walls. He couldn't get his wagon. He's got 110 wagons. How does he get those out of there? The further he gets down, the narrower it gets, and the higher the walls get on either to the east of him. This is a newspaper on August 12th.
Bismarck newspaper publishes notice of gold confirmation, and 13th, Yankton then published the gold. And Custer's still in the Nemo area. So he's going down here, and this is getting down to the bottom of the canyon that Nemo is on. Look at that hill that he's trying to find a way to get 110 wagons over there. So how do you get down there? Look at that wall. And then he has a miracle. He finds what's called now Custer Gap. This is in the 1960s, and this is my picture last year. He finds Custer's Gap, ready-made exit in the Black Hills. The trouble is, it's kind of steep in there, so he has to send his soldiers in there to make a road. And he just curves up around the hill. He goes in this way and curves up around the hill. In the meantime, there's another soldier that's got a problem. Private King. But look at that tree there. Notice anything else? Trees are still there. Big trees here. Just out of the picture. The grave of Private King, located on Nemo Road. It's on private property. I knew the gentleman that owned it. Remember, he was having kidney failure, and I believe he passed on. But he told me and he told everybody else that he gives permission. He wants his family to have permission to go pull off the road on his gravel road and then walk across through a gate. You have to go by his house and walk across. He's got 2 horses in there, or somebody's got 2 horses, and they love to come over and find out what you're doing. And not too many ticks. According to the records, 3 men are buried in the Black Hills. 2 near Indian Carl, which we talked about. 1 came on Blackhawk, near Blackhawk on Nemo Road. Still another died en route from the hills, and just a couple of days from Fort Abraham Lincoln, he died in this area. James King, H Company, is very sick. He fainted twice in the sun. Still the brutes with us called doctors, marking fit for duty. He finally could not sit on his horse any longer and being unable to get admission to the ambulance. James King had died like Cunningham. He had been criminally neglected, punished, and crowd to his death by the 2 inhumane brutes with us called doctors. St. King was sewn into canvas and was ordered to be interred that evening. However, to this, Major Tilford objected. Supposedly, you're not supposed to bury somebody that quickly. Custer wanted him buried now. And they're still down. They haven't got through Custer Gap. So now they're coming through Custer Gap. And if the commanding officer could not wait with the train in the morning, so during this time they come up to, and on the 12th they camp right up above, right by the highway is. And it's above Blackhawk, but right near where King was buried. Custer refused to wait in the morning for the burial. He took the command and moved off. Tilford kept his battalion there to bury King. Okay. And I've actually copied this off, printed it out, and I've posted it at the gravesite just because I felt. And so it happened that the lieutenant colonel of the 7th Cavalry did not wait in the morning with the command. And as he was leaving camp, companies C, G, K, M, and H were marching to the solemn strains of the band to where the grave had been dug, full honors and a fire over the gravesite. In the gray twilight of morning, the men with bowed heads, tears trickling down the sunburned cheeks, the dead body suspended over the grave, the captain with his gray hair and teeth, reading the service, the silence, all are impressed on my memory, never to be erased. And that's his gravesite looking from the road. Right. And this was redone by a Boy Scout. And the records are out at the Fort Meade Museum, from what I understand. And then this is a close-up picture of it. The highway is over here. And this is just at the top of the hill where they came up out of the Nemo area through Custer Gap. This is a picture taken the next day above, in that area. Right? This is the camp. So if you go on Nemo Road right before you get to right past Dottie's fire department and all that, come to the flat area. There's this whole housing area. And one of the signs on the road says 7th Cavalry Drive or something like that. Some people call that the Cavalry Fields area. It's just past that where King was buried. But that's also the camp, and this is what it looked like. These are the officers and some of the civilians of it. This is Ludlow here. Custer's laying down here. Ventine's here. There's one close to her. It was also the site of the second baseball game where the other team won. They picked a different umpire. And now the other team won. But this game lasted 3 hours, 3 minutes. And one of the engineering party actors of the umpire. He wasn't with either Ford's soldiers. And that's bloody right there. And that's Tom Custer. These guys all look old, right? Most of these guys are young, pretty young. Most of them in their late 20s. This is because of the beard. I'm actually 25. The gray hair's from teaching high school. And then they left through Piedmont, and this is the last camp in the Black Hills area. There's Fairview, 1874, 1974. They left on the 14th, they left the Hills Fairview camp. The return trip was the 16th through the 30th. Custer decided we need to get there fast, so he doubled the mileage. He also went a little longer route, but he doubled the mileage. And because of this, with the worn out horses and mules and stuff, they started to lag behind. So Custer turned around and said, if they lag behind, shoot them. And Ewart guessed that more than 50 were shot out in the prairie because Custer wouldn't wait to go slow. And then finally, he gets in there on 26 August, Sergeant Smedker of Company L, who had been sick the past week, died last night in hospital. His mind was wandering the last 12 hours. He was buried this evening in his own company, alone standing. The usual honors were rendered with Trooper Penwell sounding taps. And at the end of it, they get back, and they're right before they get to Fort Abraham Lincoln, and Custer stops, puts out guards around the entire group, and doesn't want anybody to get into Fort Abraham Lincoln before he can. He wanted to surprise the people at the fort. He wanted to be the one of honor. Okay? Tilford took his 4 companies. Instead of going into Abraham Lincoln, he went south and went into camp, and then the next day went down further down to Fort Rice. And this is a picture of Fort Rice, and this is the remains of Fort Rice, which is south of Abraham Lincoln on the Missouri River. It's on a point of land that sticks out. Kind of neat. And so the expedition came to an end, for which our national honor was stained. The result hardly equals the value of one of the many horses lost by us, and only a success as far as the Custer family is concerned. He didn't like it. The expedition was finding their way out of Nemo when this came out, August 12th, gold. It's the same time King is being buried. But the Bismarck Tribune is publishing the word. The nation knows it. Custer stuck in the Black Hills, can't get out of Nemo area, but newspapers are saying that G-O-L-D, that 4-letter word, that nasty 4-letter word. But was it really gold? A general and heated debate grew up over the accuracy of Custer's dispatches. But when the report of the expedition geologist, Professor Winchell, stated that he did not see any gold, the official responsible for the expeditions were confused. So Custer said, we've got gold, it's sitting on my desk. And the head geologist, whose responsibility is to identify this, says he didn't see any. And he's right in the middle of the camp, right in the middle of all this activity. Also at the same time, the government was looking for a place to take the Red Cloud Agency from where Fort Robinson is, and move it further north. Because the agency was actually outside of the Sioux reservation. They decided to move it north. Hyman and some others had an expedition, and they went through the Black Hills, the southern hills, down by Hot Springs. Didn't get anywhere close to anywhere else in the Black Hills. And he said they found no gold. He even stated that the Black Hills was not good even for Native Americans. But he also told the Native Americans, especially Spotted Tail, to get permission to take the expedition through there looking for a place to put the reservation. He told Spotted Tail that if they don't find anything for miners to find in there, then none of the whites will not come in. And he was going to make sure they didn't find anything. Okay. Later on, he's called an Indian hunter. Critics blame this on his favoritism to the Sioux. Custer himself suggested collusion between Winchell and the Office of Indian Affairs. Now remember, this goes back to the Army versus the Indian Affairs. This goes back all the way to the 1860s. The Sioux now suspected that the whites would now be permitted to appropriate their lands, hence the Steve's Road, as they call it. Ludlow's after-action report. I regret that Professor Winchell, who accompanied the expedition as geologist, was a bit of professional peak to stand between him and determination of a very important fact, viz. The existence of gold in the Black Hills. As geologist of the expedition, no doubt he felt that questions pertaining to mineral discoveries should be referred to him for formal discussions. Because everyone knew it was gold, no one bothered to go to him and tell him it was gold so he could confirm it was gold. Had Winchell not been influenced by the feeling, had he not waited for some person to bring specimen of gold to his tent and formally request his professional opinion on it, this is him, this is Ludlow. As it is, he simply says that he might have said without accompanying the expedition, and what everyone who did not accompany the expedition can say, viz. That he saw none of the gold. What he did not see, it was wholly due to his inaction in the matter. This is Ludlow's official report, which was accompanying Winchell's report. And then this is Hyman. Hyman was involved with Father Pierre Desmond, treaty in 1868. Looking to declare saw no gold. Human fully discounted Custer's report as mere fabrication. Whereas Custer portrayed the Black Hills as a treasure house, Hyman saw the area fit even for an Indian agency, would be called an Indian lover. And then finally, this gentleman, Lieutenant Colonel Grant, back in Washington, he informed reporters that Custer's dispatches were distorted. The validity of Custer's report was weighed against the adverse effects of Hyman, Grant, and Winchell. It was pointed out that even if gold did exist, miners would not be able to prospect the newest Eldorado because the Treaty of 1868. So, did he find gold? Did he not find gold? So, half the 7th Cavalry saying, yeah, he found gold. And then the other half, the experts, are saying, no, there's no gold there. And Washington's sitting there going, oh God, what happened here? And then something else happens after Christmas. The turmoil came to a head March 1st, 1875, when F. A. Richard, then John Gordon, arrived in Sioux City. They spent the winter prospecting in the Black Hills and confirmed Custer's findings and displayed gold the Gordon party had discovered and mined in the Black Hills, in Custer's area, at the stockade. Considering this, the government moved to resolve the Black Hills question. On March 27th, Walter P. Jenney was appointed to conduct a geologic survey of the region. This led to the Dodge-Jenney expedition of 1875. Also, a delegation of Sioux would be brought to the nation's capital to bargain for opening the Black Hills to the whites. The results, just what did the expedition flying in the Black Hills. The expedition posed as many questions as it answered. The nation, upon hearing of the discovery of gold, became more important than ever to open the territory one way or another. Almost immediately, groups from all over the country, and actually the world later on, began planning on getting to the Black Hills. At least 3 would start. 2 would stop, and 1 would be caught, and their wagons burned. And most of the wagons burned were by this guy named Fred Evans. Anybody know about him? Evans, Swim, Hot Springs. Civic groups around the hill began organizing and promoting their location as the best way to get into the hills. So the civic groups around, the towns around it, are starting to say, hey, come to us, we can sell you the stuff and you go get into the Black Hills. Now the government has to stop them. The Army found itself, rather than fighting the Sioux, actually going on the side of the Sioux, and now they had to guard the Black Hills from the whites. Which is interesting because their government and the government sent Custer in to find the gold. Small groups of miners then began the illegal assault on the hills, Gordon Party being the most documented. In the end, Winthrop said the cat was out of the bag. White man civilization was again on the march, and nothing could stop it. Benteen's troop H was dispatched in 1875 to the Black Hills to round up and bring up miners. A number were rounded up and escorted out, but immediately frontier civil courts would turn the men loose, and they would return to the hills as soon as they could get a fresh outfit. One gentleman that came in with the Gordon Party was questioned about, after being arrested and brought out, asked, was it worth going into the hills? And he said, well, I've been run out of the hills 5 times and I can stand it as long as the Army can. And he actually did come back. And what Winthrop wrote in his book is that the freed Indians, there's a word of gold rush getting out, the rush of the Black Hills begin, the Gordon Party sneaks in, and that's the next continuing story. Ghost towns of the Black Hills. Prequel, class number 7. I started class. I like him one section. Anyway, that's where I've taken you. How far over did I go? Is it 6 o'clock yet? No. Anybody got any questions? He's getting up on it. I didn't even find it.
Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? That's why we're here.
Was the Gordon Party the one that had any tension?
Yes, the first white woman that they're trying to write out of history.
Yeah.
She was a white woman and wrote in the language of her day, not in nowadays.
Anybody else?
I think she was Republican.
Well, here's one, right here.
Custer always wanted to be first after daughters and this and that. Is there anything that supports the fact that maybe Custer was the first one to ever have an outhouse raised in that Nemo?
Well, if they got lost in Nemo, I'm sure there was some racing to the outhouse out there, but maybe not outhouse races.
That was
That was really good. Thank you. That moment of levity.